podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to an EPL Index special, ladies and gents. It is Friday, the 28th of June, which means in about 48 hours, a deadline will be reached. Not the transfer deadline, I know that, but the FFP, the PSR deadline, if you call it that. And there is a lot to debate, discuss, download with this, because basically all those 6 clubs that are linked with this seem to be doing all the business at the same time. So we've got a lot to run through in this period. And here to join me, fellow EPL contributor, Ben Pescod. Ben, how are we?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm excited to talk about some transfers. Normally, this stage of the window is normally quite quiet, but it's been quite the opposite this year. So, yeah, looking forward to getting stuck into it, yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird one. Normally, it's a bit more lively. There's the odd one, like there's Michael Elise, he's been going to Bayern, and the odd one that's dropped. But it's the FFP clubs. It's the PSR ones that are doing the most. So, ladies and gents, we will run through those. We will run through club by club. We'll talk about outgoings. We'll talk about the drama around these clubs. We'll talk about who potentially is incoming. And Christ, we might have to spend an hour on the Chelsea section alone. So we'll see how that goes. But Ben, just as a bit of a guidance, because people are always, they'll say it, you'll know they're going like, what is this FFP, PSR? So we'll do some sort of quick fire questions. We could only lose a certain amount over a certain period. So, Ben, how many years are we talking? How many are we allowed for FFP, PSR?
Well, it depends massively on the ownership. You look at teams like Everton, obviously, they had struggled with it for a long time, but with their cash injection, it's not so common with them. You saw it a little bit with Chelsea the first few months after Bowley came in, but now obviously they're getting stuck with it. So, yeah, this is why we're seeing so many teams now going for pure profit with academy players, which is sad, really. We shouldn't really be looking at selling academy players, but that's seemingly how it's going at the minute. But, yeah, there's some crazy transfer fees going around at the minute as well, which is not helping other clubs. You see a lot of different clubs are now fighting in different markets, which really doesn't help the teams that aren't really affected by FFP. So it does have a big impact on the rest of the league as well. So, yeah.
Knock-on effects, yeah. 3 years approximately, 105 million losses. Clubs can amortise, spread the contract over 5 years. It used to be longer, but Chelsea milked that, didn't they, and got that loophole closed. And here we are, ladies and gents. So, we'll get into first club. And Ben, there doesn't seem a better place to start than Chelsea, because approximately 68,000 players they've been linked with over the last few days, 1 million different forwards. But we'll talk outgoings for Chelsea first of all. So, Chelsea outgoings. Is there any real names on the block that we're seeing at the moment? I might be looking under the wrong rocks or nooks and crannies, but I'm not really seeing many outgoings in straight links. Are you?
No, we'll see. Chalobah seems to be the one at the minute. Obviously, we all know they're trying to ship him off. Obviously, there's been Gallagher over recent months. That seems to have gone quiet. Even you had Liverpool inquiring about Levi Colwill, supposedly. That's all went quiet. So I actually think them two will both stay. Which then just leaves, really Chalobah off the top of my head. Obviously, might be him. So who knows?
Yeah, it's a strange one. There's really not many linked with balancing the books. However, I know Chelsea fans, you're going to be screaming, aren't you, about we sold the hotel. Yes, you did. You sold the training ground to yourself. All those types of things as well. Absolutely. And let's look at a few that have been linked with ins. I suppose the most recent story, which struck me as a bit mental, to be honest, and might as well start here, because Murillo, the Nottingham Forest centre-back, left-footed as well, done very well in a really struggling side. I mean, what did you think when you saw this story, Ben, and the link was for a quote of about 70 million quid for Murillo? What struck you for that one?
It's just bonkers. You look at, like Branthwaite and Man United is about the same price, and you look at Branthwaite. To me, Murillo was a good player, but 70 million, it screams of, desperate from Nottingham Forest, but equally, Chelsea probably just as stupid to actually go through with it. So I don't know. It's one of those. So he's a good player, but 70 million is just ridiculous in my opinion. But
seems crazy. Yeah, I think especially on the market forces. And then we heard about Alexander Isak, the Newcastle forward. They inquired about him. They were told it's going to be a similar price as Moises Caicedo, so around the 110, 115 million ballpark. So that pretty much scratched it off the list. But why they thought it would be cheap, especially with Newcastle's needs as well, which we'll come on to, God knows. There's a few ridiculous ones we've got to get off the docket there. Ones that are interesting, Ben, you talked about youngsters and things like that. I mean, this one stands out like a sore thumb. And as I'm talking about Kellyman, there's going to be some Villa fans telling me, like, this boy's good. I have no doubts about that. But about 600 grand for Derby a year or so ago to now a deal that looks like it's going to be 19 million quid for a player that's got pretty much zero senior first team experience. Was that the one that was standing out for you when you were talking about the academy products?
yeah, that was the one where when I saw it on my phone when it first came through, I'll be confident I hadn't heard of him. I genuinely hadn't heard of him.
Nah.
I've done a bit of research and said he's made 6 senior appearances. I genuinely thought he hadn't made any, so that took me by surprise. But I mean, I have no doubt that he's probably a decent player, similar to Chukwuemeka, who they've got from Aston Villa.
Yeah.
But at least we'd seen a bit about him. But to me, again, this just screams two teams working together to try and help each other more than anything. But who knows, he could be the next big thing. We just don't know. And obviously, you'll know more than anyone. We've seen teams like Liverpool kind of get big price for players who haven't played much football and stuff like that. But to me, this is just a bit more on the borderline of it's suspicious. But we'll see. He might be really good. Who knows?
Yeah, it is a tough one. It will be interesting. And listen, I know there's going to be Villa fans who are listening to this saying, now he's a class player, and its potential might be huge. I've no doubt there's talent there. You're not going to get that amount for his age in the first place without there being real talent. But the jump for, like you said, 6 first-team appearances, that is massive. You talked about Villa and Chelsea working together. The Juan Duran one seems to have gone quiet because that looked nailed on quite early doors, but that one seems to have dropped off as well. That's absolutely crazy. And Silmino, just another one Chelsea are doing, the Boca defender. All the suggestions, Ben, that maybe it's me. You can tell me if I'm being crazy here. Another player that they're set to buy and ship out to Strasbourg with all their FFP PSR issues. They're still doing that multi-club feeder. Does that surprise you, or is it just like Chelsea, don't be surprised type of thing?
It did surprise me a little bit when I saw the price, 17 million. Obviously, I don't know. I can't claim to watch a lot of Argentinian football, but when I first saw it, I thought, maybe like a 10 million, but 17 million just to send them straight out on loan. It's just like, they just don't seem to be bothered by any sort of, you could say whatever you want to them and they'll just do what they do, and I don't get it. I mean, I wouldn't be wanting to see my club going out spending money on players like that. But again, it's just one of those. He might prove us all wrong, and in 2 years' time, he might be sat here thinking, "What signing?" But I'm not too sure on it.
Yeah, maybe. It's like you say, it's got the link of it's all project signings. There very much seems to be at Chelsea. Let's bring youngsters through the door, elite youngsters, and develop them and see where we go. Doesn't really seem to be too much for the seniors. I mean, Jonathan David's been linked with 25 to 30 million. That's gone quiet. And now the Barca youngster, Mark Guy, I think it's pronounced. I could be pronouncing that wrong. But they're set to, again, trigger that release clause around €8 million. Supposed to be going into their senior team, Chelsea. But again, it just has that feeling of, it's hard to see how these players are going to make an impact straight away. But we'll have to see. The only one that I think is worth mentioning, and this has come on the docket today, Ben, to finish off Chelsea, Dewsbury Hall, because he looked nailed on to be going to Brighton, didn't he? Part of a swap deal, cash, that suited Leicester and everything. However, you wonder if his ex-manager, Maresca, who's now there at Chelsea, has sort of engineered this a little bit. But Chelsea have apparently made an offer, so they're not been accepted, but they're in talks. what do you make of sort of Dewsbury Hall as a player? And considering Chelsea have got some good midfield players, do you think he fits in there, or does someone have to go to make that happen?
To me, it feels a lot like if Gallagher was to go, Dewsbury Hall would be the kind of, not ready-made, I don't think he's as good as Gallagher, but like he'd fit that kind of mould. But with Gallagher, as we mentioned before, it doesn't look like he's going. I don't really see where he's going to get the game time. I mean, Dewsbury Hall's a really good player. Obviously, I've been well in around Sunderland, so I watched him. He was a step above in the Championship, and obviously he was really good in the Premier League when Leicester were in it before. But I mean, I've seen that the original offer was 30.
Yeah,
might not be true, and I think Leicester want 40. And I just think for that sort of money, there's probably better value out there. But he is homegrown. He's a decent.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a bit of a. I think I'd be a bit underwhelmed if it was my club, but
yeah, it's one way you look at it and you think, and it's not to be derogatory about Dewsbury Hall at all, because I think he's got energy. I think he's a very good player overall. I want to be clear on that. But then you look at Chelsea's midfield, like you say, and there's Enzo, there's Caicedo, there's real talent in there. You think Chukwuemeka's young and to develop. Conor Gallagher is in the England side right now, whereas Kieran Dewsbury Hall isn't. So you kind of wonder about that as well. It's not a bad signing. It's just one where you'd have a few question marks. But then you're also starting to think, he was at Leicester, so was Enzo Maresca. Is this the manager or head coach saying, this is a player for us, and sort of pushing towards that deal? But Christ knows what will happen with Chelsea. The only thing me and Ben are certain on, ladies and gents, they will do business before the 30th of June, and they will do a fair bit of it as well. Now, we'll move to your neck of the woods, Ben, the North East. This is an interesting club because it's quite clear that Newcastle need to do business outgoings-wise. There's zero doubt about that at all. There's a lot of talk, people trying to, almost are they trying to force players out? Can they get the prices needed for players? Can they essentially raise the money? The only thing we know for definite is that Bruno Guimaraes' clause has expired, hasn't it? So that is now off the docket for that set B. Doesn't mean he'll stay there. There could be a big bid from someone, but that clause is gone. Newcastle, Ben, outgoings. What are we hearing in terms of who do you think could be potentially sold to balance the books? Who might be moving on from St James's Park?
I think the one that's pretty much, I'd say there's two that's pretty much nailed on at this point. I think Minte will leave this summer. Obviously, the problem is that all these clubs they're in a rush to get it done before the deadline. And if clubs that aren't involved, they're going to know that the ball's in their court, basically, and that's the problem that all these clubs are having. I think Minte will go. I think he wants the Everton move, but I think he's a bit better than Everton, to be honest. I think he can do a bit better than that, but that's about 40 million. And I think the other one's Callum Wilson. It surprised me at the end of the season. I've always really liked Callum Wilson, but I think the Newcastle fans will go on a bit fed up with him. Always injured and stuff like that. I think he'll definitely go. And obviously, Saudi interest for him. So make that what you will. And I think if it gets out of the final day and Callum Wilson hasn't gone, it wouldn't shock me at all to see him go to Saudi.
Yeah, I think probably Almiron's in that boat. We know he turned that deal down last time, didn't he? He had the option. He turned the options to go to the Middle East down. He's a weird one, like you say, because he's been linked with a lot of clubs. He had a strong link with Liverpool at one stage. He then also, as you said, looked like he was going to be part of the Calvert-Lewin deal, and that looks dead on both sides, doesn't it? The Calvert-Lewin stayed at Everton, Minte not going. And then even yesterday, we had the stories that they'd agreed a deal with Lyon for Minte to go there around 40 million, but that looks like it might have fallen through. It just wonders, there's a few suggestions that Newcastle, as you said, going right towards this 30th of June deadline, might just get a little bit desperate, as in looking at options, and clubs might be trying a lowball offer, all those types of things. If it does get right to this deadline, and say by the time this comes out, something solid's not broken, are you fancying that it's Wilson and Almiron to Saudi? Is that what your cynical mind is telling you?
Yeah, I would be leaning towards that. I mean, today you've even seen more links with Anthony Gordon going to Liverpool, but obviously with him being in the England squad, that's never going to happen. Headline. I don't think Bruno and I think he'll rule them out. I don't think, as much as Newcastle need to sell, I don't think they'll let them go this summer, especially not in the next couple of days. So, yeah, I'll be leaning towards Wilson and Almiron.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see what Newcastle do. They do seem to be the ones where they've been lucky and they've been trying to ship players out, but they don't seem successful so far. Still time. I mean, the links have also been, haven't they, seen them with the likes of Tomori? There seem to be suggestions to other AC Milan players. And Newcastle are definitely in the market for another centre-half. We know they got Lloyd Kelly. We know they missed out on tossing to Chelsea as well, funnily enough. So, yeah, they will be one to keep an eye on. And jumping down the country, we'll go to the Midlands. Quite a few in the Midlands, isn't there? We might need to check the balances. So, Aston Villa to start with. I mean, it seems a bit crazy in a way, Ben. I know Villa fans are passionate about this. They've had their best season for so long. They are in the Champions League, so they'll have that money coming in. And yet they still got to balance the books. I mean, there's only really one place to start with Aston Villa. This Douglas Luiz deal, where he looks like he's going to Juventus for a set fee. Juventus will give them two players and cash. It feels like an American-style trade. I mean, what have you made of that whole deal? Because Luis had a really good season last year.
To be honest, I think you've got to give Aston Villa, the way they've dealt with all this, quite a bit of credit. You see all these teams sort of like hanging on the fence about what to do. Aston Villa just took the bit of bullet. Obviously, they don't want to lose Douglas Luiz, but they basically have to at this point. Just got on with it. And to be fair, the two players they're getting from Juventus are quite promising as well, and 25 mil, I think it is, with it.
Yeah.
So I kind of respect the way they've just got on with it and wrapped it up, because I think the other clubs will regret not putting in the groundwork earlier to get all these deals sorted. Because I think Aston Villa are pretty much, once this goes through, I think they're about okay with the whole Dobbin and Eric Boerman. So, yeah, I think Villa have dealt with it really well. It's a shame, obviously, after such a good season that they have to do this, but it's just a position that they're in, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is the nature, like you said. Maybe you're right. They are the ones that seem to almost accepted the situation, got ahead of it and thought, right, if Douglas Luiz or someone's got to go, let's get a good deal. And I might be pronouncing some of these names wrong, so apologies, Villa fans, but it's Berentia, it's the midfielder coming in, and Illing Jr., the England under-21 left winger. So they're getting another aggressive midfielder and a left winger. They're also set to complete a deal for the likes of Ross Barkley as well. That's expected to go through. So, yeah, maybe, just maybe, like you said, they are getting ahead of it. The Juan Duran one, that you start to think that is not going to happen. That was one that was really early. It seems like Matt Law came out and telegraphed and said the premise, the deal's done. It's now a case of, can they make it work? And then Ian Matson came in, didn't he, crazily enough, as well, in the meantime, for about 37.5 million. So that feels like a good bit of business. Juan Duran, 40 million quid, Ben. Do you think someone at Villa Park has seen sense, or do you think that might still go through?
I don't think they'll go through. Not for that price. I actually quite like him as a player. I think he's got a lot of potential. Every time I've watched him, he's been quite exciting. And I think he's actually the perfect understudy to Watkins. So, and if I was him, I wouldn't be pushing to go to Chelsea anyway. I mean, you look at Chelsea, you've got Jackson, obviously Nkunku will be hoping to be fair all season. They're signing that young lad from Barcelona.
Yeah.
I just don't get why you would go. To me, I would rather play Champions League football, even if it is as a backup. If I was Duran, I'd be staying put, 100%.
Yeah, it's one that I'm simpler, and I know it seems quite clear. I don't know if it's because of a big wage rise. We know how Chelsea operate. The wages stakes, don't get me wrong. But like you said, Ollie Watkins back up. There's going to be more games than ever in the Champions League. He's going to be, Emery likes to rotate his squad, so you just fancy he would get those games. So it feels like that one is probably done now, but there's still time, I suppose. You never know with some sort of involved deal. And this one for an involved deal, I mean, I won't say too much on this, Ben. What did you make of it when Tim Irabuna went from Villa to Everton for about 10, 11 million pounds, as was suggested. And Lewis Dobbin went the other way for about 10 or 11 million pounds, both homegrown. I'll let you share your thoughts on this one because mine are probably coming through too easily.
I remember I was actually with my brother, who's a big Sunderland fan, for seeing the Championship when it all came through, and he told me, and I genuinely, I thought I was hearing things. I couldn't believe it. I mean, these are two players that potential, yeah, they've probably got us, but they'd be decent signings for the upper Championship, and especially not for 10 million. Like, if someone like Sheffield United signed these players, that would make more sense.
Yeah.
To me, this is potentially the most blatantly obvious example of this whole two clubs working together, in my opinion. But and I mean, obviously, for years now we've said what feels is dead in the water, but apparently not anymore. Apparently they're rife again. So
yeah, if it makes sense or helps or aids financially, if you want to call it that, I think you're right. I mean, you have to look at them on paper as well. And I'm not saying these are bad players. I hate just dismissing or diminishing players like that. But Lewis Dobbin and Tim Orabunam were a million miles away from being regulars for their sides last season. So it doesn't really make too much sense why Villa, for instance, in the Champions League, will be desperate to seek Lewis Dobbin, especially when they brought in the likes of Morgan Rogers, who was more successful in the Championship last season, and other players like that. And Illing Jr. is a left winger. So, yeah, we'll let you make your judgments on that, people. I think everyone's got their own thoughts on that. But Villa, like you said, it's important to mention, guys, David Ornstein is suggesting with the deals they've done, provided the likes of Kellyman, etc., goes through, they do look good in that regard. Now, we know about Leicester. There's only really Dewsbury Hall. That might clear it all for them. That might be the best they can do. I don't think you're going to get too much money for Jamie Vardy nowadays. So we'll move down to Forest, Ben, because about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, there was that article from John Percy in the Telegraph which said Forest need to raise about 20 million by the end of June to balance those books. That needs to be sort of the net gain, as it were, for to clear their responsibilities. We saw Murillo linked, and you thought they're not going to get 70 million for him, but, you know, obviously people are still happen. When you be honest, when you first saw that Forest were going to need to raise 20 million, who were you thinking was going to be shifted out?
Well, I think last season it was Brennan Johnson, wasn't it? Tottenham, that's who it was. I mean, to be honest, Gibbs White was the first one that came in my head. And I know they're in that situation where if they lose him, I think he's their best player probably. But I know the likes of Newcastle have been keeping tabs on him and that. Yeah. So there is like suitors there if they did want to. But obviously Nate Carter's left for 20, hasn't he? So, but then, so that looked like steps in the right direction. I think that's a good amount of money to get for him. But then they're linked with Diao, who had a bid rejected 25 million in January, wasn't it? From Brentford wanted him. So all the money they've just built up. I mean, obviously, unless it goes through after the deadline. But I'm not too sure on Forest, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a weird one. Diakate is like, it looks done, doesn't it? Pretty much. We're expecting confirmation over the weekend. That's the 21 million. And like you're saying, there's also, I think, Mangala. He was on loan, wasn't he? They're expecting. You're thinking, Forest, good stuff, smart operators going clever for a while. But then they've also got, as you said, Diao linked with Betis, 25 million. You've got Carlos Miguel, the keeper, potentially coming, the big 6'8" Corinthians goalkeeper, Brazilian as well, for a good chunk of change. So you never know with Forest, people. Like Ben said, it could be quite smart. It could be, let's get Diakate done, let's get Mangala done, and then we'll wait till the 1st of July and we start again, and maybe Diao and the targets. That would make some sense. However, this is also the Nottingham Forest that broke the record of signing 32 players in a summer. So no one is quite sure how they're going to play it. But let's treat it surface level at the moment. Forest look like they may be good with a bit of sense. And just a couple of days' patience might just get it right at the City Ground, we'll have to say. And, I mean, finally, Ben, this is maybe the craziest club of the whole scenario, because we're talking the only club that's had 2 separate points deduction. The only club that's had 2 appeals to those point deductions. The only club that's been debated in Parliament over their finances and different bits. The only club that had American owners with money, who it turns out wasn't their money. The only club who, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, we're on Friday now, was sold or pretty much agreed to be sold on Tuesday, just gone, having looked like near administration. Has there been a crazier story than Everton in the last 12 months in Premier League history and finances at all?
Definitely not in my lifetime. I can't remember anything like this. It's absolutely mental. I don't think you could write it. I think if you went back in time 2 years ago, I don't think you could write how past 12 months has went for them. But hopefully these new owners can get things back on track a little bit, because you don't want to see a club Everton going down too much.
Yeah, as much as I'm sure Liverpool fans will be interested to see that, I think, yeah, this is a big club. It's one of the original clubs as well. It is important. Now, we talked about Dobbin, we talked about Irabunam as well, and how they did that. We mentioned Calvert-Lewin, so I do want to come back to that a little bit. I know I left it earlier. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, 12 months left on his deal. The suggestion was that Everton Newcastle would try to do a deal with the fee around 35 million that Everton were seeking. Newcastle looking to pay 25. So normally you think these things, Ben, it's never this straightforward, but meet in the middle somewhere, lads, you get 30 million. 25 to 35 million for Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Honest thoughts?
I'm not a fan of it at all. I know you and Ben were talking about this the other day, weren't you?
Yeah.
And I agree with everything that Ben was saying. I just don't. Maybe a few years ago, yeah, but I think since that year under Ancelotti, I've been really underwhelmed with them. Really underwhelmed. For a player with a year left on the contract, I mean, you look at Liverpool with Mane, for example. They only got 45 million. Whereas that's Sadio Mane, who'd come off one of the best seasons in his career. Everton would be trying to get 35 million for Calvert-Lewin. It's bonkers. I wouldn't pay more than 20 for him.
Yeah, and again, trying not to diminish players, but the goal record isn't that great. Yes, he's good in the air. Yes, there'll probably be a homegrown tax element like there always is, but 35 million when you look at Dominic Calvert. And it's interesting that Everton fans were quite on board with this, which I think tells its own story of shipping out Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who has had a real history of injury problems at the same time. So I don't think Everton fans would have been sad about shipping him out at all. The big story that's not yet happened, but it's maybe the biggest story apart from Elise Save the Window Bet, because it involves United, it involves Everton, Jared Branthwaite. So as we know so far, this has gone quiet. There's always rumours bubbling, but what we know officially is Everton value Branthwaite around 70 million. So yeah, just scratch your eyes around that for a second. United bid a package of 43 million, some of that made up in add-ons. I mean, United bid 43. It's never the first offer. Everton say 70. It's never the first valuation. There's usually a little bit of a come down unless very exceptional circumstances. What do you make of Jared Branthwaite's valuation?
I really like the player. I do really like the player. I think he's brilliant. And I would have had him at the Euro, that's for sure. 70 million. I honestly think that you see Harry Maguire going to Man United for the same kind of money. And I think that's what they're playing off. Realistically, I think he's probably worth around 50, to be fair. I don't think he's worth much less than that. I do think he's a really good player, but to be honest, I think Man United's bid is probably about right. Maybe a little bit off, but obviously Everton are going to hold out for way more. So, but the ball is in Man United's court with this deadline coming up. So,
yeah, no, we're not almost fully sure. There is a bit of uncertainty around where Everton stand because obviously The Roma owner has come in. He's got the exclusivity now to buy Mashiri's share. But there are still suggestions that Everton still do owe money. Has the Irabuna Dobbin switch around made a real dent and satisfied everything? It is a bit uncertain. And that was hence why the likes of Calvert-Lewin was touted for a move at the same time. Yeah, it's hard, Branthwaite, because I really like the player. Left-footed centre-halves are the unicorns at the moment, aren't they? There's not many of them around. So if you're English, left-footed, played in Holland under PSV. Eindhoven has got that experience as well, such a young player. So you can see why they were never going to accept 43. No doubts about that. But the jump from 43 to 70 is massive. I know the lazy punditry says meet in the middle, but that's a hell of a conceding from both sides, in all honesty. It's difficult to see that. Maybe, who knows, at the moment. The final one, Everton. This is a player that, almost since he's got there, he's been linked with a move away. I can't remember since he's been there when someone hasn't said, we're looking at moving him on, or this club's interested. Ben Amadou Onana, doing well for Belgium, to be fair, looks quite decent in the Belgian midfield, maybe never quite hit the heights I think Everton band wanted him to kick on to be this potential absolute monster in the Premier League. A lot of links, though, it's important to say. Villa, United, Arsenal, there seems to be a lot of interest in this player. Now, I know he's at the Euro, so this may be one for later, possibly. I get all that. Do you expect Onana to move on this summer, or do you think he'll still be at Goodison Park by the time it finishes?
I'd be surprised if he's still there at the end of this summer. But I'm sure it was last summer we said the same thing, and he ended up staying. So I'd be surprised if... I think it's got Man United wrote all over it, to be honest. I really do. But the chance of them getting him and Branthwaite is very small. So I really like the player. Again, it depends how much Everton want from him. I haven't actually seen a price that's been banded. But I think if you can get him for around 40 million, I wouldn't pay him much more than that. So, but I would be surprised if he's still there at the end of the summer.
Yeah, the links seem to be 40 to 50 million, depending on which article you want to pick. That seems to be the sort of yardstick there. I think you're right. I think you never know what's going on in a player's mind exactly, but the smart money says Amadou Onana is looking to get out of Goodison Park and move to one of these clubs. However, the price Everton may ask for him, everything that may mean, it just wouldn't surprise you if he doesn't get his wish 2 seasons in a row. We will have to see. Ben, I mean, these clubs it almost seems crazy what's happening in terms of, this is new to us all, the whole PSR scenario, clubs dealing between themselves, all these types of things. It might not just be one of these clubs, but have you got any other transfers at the moment where you're thinking, I won't be surprised if this happens with one of the PSR clubs, or do you think one of the other Premier League clubs may make a move for a player, be it at another Premier League club abroad, that you're expecting to maybe come to fruition or hear about soon? What you reckoning?
I'm not sure about expecting, but if you just go back to Nottingham Forest for a second, I said Gibbs White would be the obvious one. Another one would be Hudson-Odoi. Obviously, only signed for, could be wrong, about 4 million last summer.
Yeah.
And he's done really well. And I think Tottenham were linked with him earlier in the window. And I think obviously they could make a massive amount of profit on that. So that could be another one to maybe keep an eye on, but that seems to have cooled in recent weeks. So, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Hudson-Odoi back at a bigger club currently.
Yeah, would not surprise at all. There's still, even today, Everton apparently have made an inquiry for Jadon Philogene, the Hall, former Villa player. There's all the Dewsbury talk call is going on from one scan of Twitter. As David Ornstein's confirmed, there was a bid made that's been rejected, so we'll look at that. Even Ademola Lookman now on the radar of other clubs as well. So there is a lot going on. All we know, ladies and gents, is you'd be crazy to think that between now and midnight on the 30th of June, these clubs will not finish some of this business. Can they do it all? That will probably depend on how everything works out. And just be warned, fans of those clubs, don't be surprised if the club that maybe gets a little bit desperate as that deadline approaches. Some of the bigger boys may spell the blood in the water and come hunting, might they? So we'll have to see. So All it leaves me to say, as ever, with this PSR Scramble chat is Ben. Thanks for the time and the insight in the chat, mate. Much appreciated.
No worries. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Good stuff. And ladies and gents, that was an EPL Index transfer special.
Sports Social Podcast Network.